What if I told you that the FIA has had to thoroughly review one of the fastest cars of the moment, right after what happened in the sprint classification of the Chinese Grand Prix? Because what seemed like simply a great performance from George Russell's Mercedes has ended up becoming one of the most disturbing stories in the paddock. The Federation decided to analyze one of the most sensitive parts of the car, the system that connects the accelerator with the actual power delivery of the engine, something that is rarely investigated in such depth. And although the official report assures that everything is legal, the reality is that suspicions have not disappeared, especially after the car's performance surprised even drivers with enormous experience in the category, such as Lewis Hamilton, who has not hidden his impact upon learning the details of what the FIA found in the Mercedes. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because as Formula One enters a new technical era, any unexpected advantage raises questions, and this time those questions are aimed squarely at Russell's car. What did the FIA really see within that system? Why did you decide to investigate just that area of the car? And most importantly, could there be something in the way the Mercedes works that the rest of the teams have not yet discovered? Today we are going to analyze everything that is known so far about the new tests published by the FIA of George Russell's car after the sprint qualifying of the Chinese Grand Prix, and why this story has left Hamilton completely shocked. The Chinese Grand Prix came at a very particular time for Formula One. We are only in the first races of the season, and as usually happens when a new competitive cycle begins or unexpected differences appear between teams, any technical detail quickly becomes the object of analysis within the paddock. And this time the focus was focused directly on George Russell's Mercedes, a car that from the beginning began to generate many questions due to the way it was performing on the track. During the weekend in Shanghai, the activity was especially intense because it was a sprint format, which means that the teams had very little time to prepare their cars. Just one practice session before entering directly into the competitive sessions forces engineers and drivers to make very quick decisions about the car's configuration. In that context, every little detail can make a huge difference because there is no room to experiment too much with settings or strategies. In the midst of this scenario of technical and competitive pressure, an element appeared that caught the attention of many within the paddock: the performance of Russell's Mercedes. The car seemed to handle extremely solidly, especially in the way it responded to acceleration and power delivery on corner exits. This type of behavior is key on circuits like Shanghai, where several prolonged acceleration zones determine a good part of the lap time. When a car shows such consistent performance in those conditions, rival teams immediately start analyzing data, comparing telemetry, and studying images to try to understand where that advantage comes from. And that's exactly what happened. Attention began to turn to the inner workings of the Mercedes, particularly to the system that connects the driver's input on the accelerator with the actual response of the engine. This is where the FIA comes into the picture. The International Automobile Federation has the authority to carry out detailed technical inspections on any car if it considers that there are elements that need to be verified in greater depth. These inspections do not always mean that there is an irregularity, but they do indicate that the regulatory body wants to make sure that everything is operating within the limits of a regulation. In the case of Russell's car, the FIA decided to carry out a much more in-depth technical review than usual. It was not simply a matter of observing external components of the car, but rather directly analyzing one of the most delicate electronic systems of the car. Federation engineers reviewed the accelerator pedal assembly, the associated sensors, the way that signal is transmitted to the standard electronic unit, and the calibration maps that determine engine response. This point is extremely sensitive within modern Formula One. The accelerator pedal does not work like in a conventional car, where there is a direct mechanical connection. In current single-seaters, everything first goes through electronic systems that interpret the driver's signal and then translate it into a precise delivery of power. That process is controlled by the standardized electronic unit known as SECU, which is strictly supervised by the FIA to prevent any type of manipulation that could generate illegal advantages. During the inspection, technicians also analyze the algorithms that adapt the pedal signal and the maps that control how engine torque is applied in different conditions. This type of analysis requires reviewing electronic records, calibrations loaded into the system, and the way they interact with the rest of the car's components. This is not a superficial review. It is an in-depth examination of the brain that controls the car's power delivery. After completing all these checks, the official result was clear. George Russell's Mercedes was in full compliance with the technical regulations. The FIA confirmed that there was no irregularity in the operation of the system and that all the parameters analyzed were within what was allowed by the regulations. From a technical and regulatory point of view, the car was declared fully compliant. However, in Formula One, the story rarely ends with a simple official statement. Because even though the car has been approved, the fact that such a specific inspection has been carried out in such a critical area of the car is already enough to fuel all kinds of conversations within the paddock. And this is where another important element appears in this story: Lewis Hamilton's reaction. The 7-time world champion, now racing for Ferrari, knows perfectly well the inner workings of Mercedes after spending so many years within the team. That experience makes any information about the performance of Russell's car carry special weight for him. The fact that the FIA has precisely revised the system that controls the power delivery of the Mercedes, combined with the performance seen on the track during the sprint weekend in China, has generated a surprised reaction within the British driver's entourage. Not because there is a confirmed violation, but because the performance shown by the car suggests that Mercedes could have found an extremely efficient way to optimize that system within the limits of the regulation. Because one thing became clear after the technical inspection: the throttle system, sensors, calibration maps, and connection to the standard electronic unit were within the permissible parameters. There was no illegal manipulation or prohibited software, nor modifications outside the homologation approved by the FIA. But that does not mean that the car's performance does not have a technical explanation that many in the paddock are still trying to decipher. This is where the real game begins within Formula One. When a team finds a more efficient way to manage something as critical as power delivery, is not necessarily breaking the regulations. In many cases, he is simply interpreting the rules more intelligently than everyone else. And that is precisely one of the greatest skills of the technical departments of the leading teams. What several analysts began to notice over the weekend in China was the way the Mercedes seemed to exit corners with extremely clean and progressive engine response. The publicly visible telemetry data showed that the car's power delivery was very stable, with no sharp spikes or sudden losses of traction. That kind of behavior usually indicates that the system that translates pedal pressure into torque is extremely well optimized. In technical terms, what could be happening is that Mercedes has managed to fine-tune the way the throttle signal adapts to different grip, speed, and downforce conditions. This is achieved through extremely refined calibration maps within the car's electronic system. Although all teams use the same standard electronic unit overseen by the FIA, the way they configure those maps can make important differences in the behavior of the car. If the driver can apply power earlier when exiting a corner without causing excessive rear-wheel slip, he gains time immediately. That advantage accumulates curve after curve, sector after sector. And when viewed from the outside, it can give the impression that the car simply has more power, when in reality, what is happening is much more efficient management of the available power. These types of solutions are especially valuable on circuits like Shanghai. The Chinese track has several areas where drivers must accelerate progressively, while the car is still finishing rotating on corner exit. If the power control system is perfectly calibrated, the driver can make better use of every meter of track without compromising the stability of the car. That is why the FIA inspection focused precisely on that area of the system. If there were some kind of irregular advantage, the place it would probably appear would be in the way the pedal signal is translated into engine response. However, after reviewing sensors, electronic signals, adaptation algorithms, and maps loaded in the electronic unit, technicians confirmed that everything was within the regulations. Even so, within the paddock, no one ignores what this could mean at a competitive level. If Mercedes has indeed found a more efficient way to optimize that system, the advantage could be significant throughout the entire season. And this is where the figure of Lewis Hamilton comes in again. The Briton knows better than almost anyone how Mercedes' internal engineering works. For more than a decade, he worked directly with the engineers who developed some of the most dominant cars in Formula One history. So when signs emerge that the team has found a particularly effective technical solution, Hamilton knows it's not just a good weekend. Meanwhile, the FIA has already done its part: investigate, review, and confirm that the car complies with the rules. But in Formula One, the story rarely ends there. Many times when a technical solution passes official inspection, what is really happening is that a new technological battle between the teams has just begun. In this case, the focus is on the behavior of George Russell's Mercedes when accelerating, especially on corner exit. That stability in power delivery that was seen during the weekend in China is not something that goes unnoticed by the engineers of the other teams. In a sport where milliseconds can decide a classification or a victory, any hint of superior optimization becomes an immediate object of study. The FIA already made its verdict clear after analyzing the car. The accelerator pedal sensors, communication with the standard electronic unit, calibration maps, and algorithms that adapt the accelerator signal were examined in detail and no irregularities were found. The system fully complies with the technical regulations. The situation that has arisen around George Russell's Mercedes after the sprint qualifying of the Chinese Grand Prix demonstrates, once again, how Formula One really works. In this sport, when a clear performance difference appears, questions immediately arise. Rival teams investigate, engineers analyze every available piece of information, and the FIA steps in to make sure everything stays within the limits of the regulations. And in this case, after an extremely in-depth inspection of one of the car's most sensitive systems, the official conclusion was forceful. Russell's car is completely legal. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.